I was in Minnesota for the Minnesota State High School state championships. But I had lunch with Eric Johnson and Sean Goldsworthy.
Really?
And true story. And
Yeah.
there were some Rikard Grönborg stories flying about. It was great.
Oh boy, we're not going to bring him up here, are we? Or no?
We're not gonna bring him up here, but it was so interesting because I can't even recall how it happened. I think maybe Sean brought your name up, and then Eric's like, oh yeah, he's like, I think he said he was a freshman, and you might have been a senior at the time when he started. And I believe did you come back and coach him as well, or were you a grad assistant when he was still playing?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So when he came in as a freshman, that was my senior year.
Got it.
And then I went back to Sweden. I played a couple more years professionally, and then I decided I want to go back to finish up my degrees because I still had, a year and a half left of my bachelor's degree. And then when I showed up at campus there, the coach we had, Craig Dahl, he saw me and said that it would be perfect for me to start helping out as a grad assistant there at St. Cloud. And that was Eric's senior year. So I both played with him and coached him.
Wow. And then Sean mentioned did the two of you coach or help out with the high school team locally in St. Cloud as well?
Yes, St. Cloud Tech. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So a former teammate of mine took over as a head coach, Tim Hannes. I played with him for 3 years at St. Cloud, and he took over as a head coach, and that was my second year of finishing my bachelor's at St. Cloud. And then Sean was the other assistant, so we're coaching there together with Tim.
Unreal. So going back to when you were growing up playing in Sweden, was the NCAA like even on your radar? Because I would imagine at the time that you came over, I mean, now it's a lot more common to see Europeans playing college hockey, but I went back and looked. I'm like, man, you were a bit of a unicorn at the time.
Yeah, 100%. It wasn't even on the map, to be honest with you. For me, it was almost out of reach to be on the national teams and like that, and definitely NHL wasn't even on the map, and NCAA we didn't even know about. So it's definitely a different environment back then. We had two TV channels, and there was the only hockey was shown was from our back in the days elite league of hockey in Sweden, as well as the national team. That's about it.
So and I'm doing the math. Obviously, when you make the jump to St. Cloud, you don't have a smartphone where you can FaceTime mom and dad and keep them updated. What was the conversation like with your folks to say, hey, I've got this opportunity to go to Minnesota and play college hockey? How did that decision get made?
It's a really long story. It's actually a pretty interesting story. There's a lot of names you're going to recognize who was involved in this whole transition going from Sweden to North America, in this case, U.S. and Canada. But I got invited to go to Montreal. The Canadiens, there's actually a junior team that was connected with Montreal Canadiens. It was called Verdun Canadiens, and also they had a farm team in Sherbrooke at that time. So we had some connections, business connections with my dad, with Mats Naslund, that played for, Le Petit Viking, as they call them in Montreal. So he helped me out of facilitating that and putting me up and helped me get into that camp. So I that was my first step, was actually go to Montreal, in this case Verdun.
No
and
kidding.
Start there, yeah. And this, I believe, I was 19 at the time. So I showed up in Montreal and showing up at the airport. I'm a little bit late to get my sticks. My sticks gets caught in the customs and something like that. So, so I'm going out. I think I'm like 45 minutes to an hour late. Obviously, showing up an hour late, there's no one there to pick me up. So what do I do then? Well, I have to go to the payphones, start making phone calls to.
Oh my God.
Get a hold of someone, and since I only had a name on the scribbled note, I start calling that name in the phone book. And
no way.
Yes, true story. So I had like 4 or 5 different phone calls. Of course, they're the French speaking, and my French is not good. My English wasn't very good even. So I couldn't really connect with that person. And finally, I got a hold of my dad. I remember that, and he somehow got a hold of this person who came back and picked me up at the airport. And I remember going in, packing up my sticks and everything else, and we go into his house, and he was going to help me out. And that person turned in to be that I didn't know about, because I didn't grow up in NHL, but Jacques Lemaire. was the guy that picked me up.
Come on. Are you serious?
Serious. So I
Wow.
stayed at his house the first night in North America, and he helped me set up with the Billy family. He was the GM, I believe, for the junior team in Verdun at that point in time. So that was kind of a little bit
What
of
was that car ride like when did you clue in that, hey, this guy's a Hall of Famer?
not until a couple of days later, to be honest with you. I had no idea, no idea. But
Wow.
that's how fresh
That's
I was
amazing.
to the world of NHL or world of North American hockey. Obviously, you follow in Sweden, you follow the NHL guys, the Swedish NHL. You read the articles and stuff like that. But the only NHL games you watched was in the hockey camps in Sweden. The Super 8 film was going on. The Stanley Cup. 1980, the Islanders winning or something like that. So it wasn't a little up to date when it comes to the except for the Swedish stars, of course, or the really great stars that were playing at that time, not retired. So yeah, it was a little bit of an interesting start for me.
Yeah, no kidding. And so I imagine then St. Cloud saw you play at the camp. They made you an offer, and then next thing you know, you're off to central Minnesota.
Yeah, a little bit longer story than that actually, but so I did pretty well at camp, and they wanted me to move on to Sherbrooke, but unfortunately, like the classic, I got hurt, so I went back to Sweden. And at that point in time, several colleges start calling me, um, and the ones that were really really on my radar, or the I was on their radar, I should say, I was University of Maine Black Bears, Sean Walsh back then, and they already had a Swedish guy on the roster at that point in time. So he started calling me. He's also from Stockholm. And so he starts calling me and showing interest in that sense. But I do have some family in Minnesota, Wisconsin area. My dad's first cousins live there. So, and they're born and raised in the U.S. But so they start helping me out and get interest. And that's when University of Minnesota first got interested in me. They saw me skate and all that stuff because I came over and visited my cousins, and they saw me skate and they showed quite a bit of interest. But back then, as you remember, there was only Minnesota kids that were being recruited to that program.
That's right. Yeah.
So I was down there, and I don't know if you remember this name, Jack Blatherwick was like assistant coach there. Yeah, but he was also with the 1980 Olympic team and
Got
helped
it.
out. So he was really interested in European hockey back then, and Doug Woog was the head coach, and they really wanted to help me and all that stuff. But of course, they couldn't recruit me because I wasn't from Minnesota. So I went to a couple of recruiting trips or whatever to
Yeah.
University of Minnesota, Duluth, and as well as Wisconsin, and finally St. Cloud was a new program, or a newer program, which actually Herb Brooks started. He
Yeah.
was part of the original guys that started that program. So, and they offered me a scholarship right then. It was perfect for me too. A little bit smaller school at that point of time, and I needed help with the different culture and get used to
I
English.
bet. Yeah.
So it was perfect, and a new program. I was part of that team that played the first game in the National Hockey Center there in St. Cloud.
No way.
Yes.
Did the Olympic ice have anything to do with it? That would have been a little bit more familiar.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it. They were interested in bringing over a European player. If I say so myself, a good skater that could skate and all that stuff. So I think that was a part of maybe start a movement of recruiting European players to college hockey. So
For sure.
now we're talking like late '80s. So that's a while ago.
So, I got a bunch of development questions, but I'm curious back then when we think of how defensemen play today. It's so different than in that era where I mean, when you came over to North America, a defenseman's role, I don't think I'm exaggerating, would have been you get the puck and you get it off your stick as quickly as possible. You don't stick handle it, glassing out is a pretty good option. But we look at defensemen today, and I think a lot of the way defensemen are allowed to play can be traced back to Sweden and how maybe players were developed then. So, if we go back to when you came over, what kind of defenseman were you? Did you come up in an environment where you were, given enough leash to make plays and jump up in the play and be involved in all facets?
Yeah, 100%. Actually, I started out as a forward. I went to camp in
Wow.
Montreal actually as a forward,
Okay.
and I was a little bit of a hybrid. So a rover, if you like. It was kind of my job with the team in Sweden, moving up and attack and everything else, and could join and play both ways. But there was a lot of things that were different. I would say is the culture shock was quite significant in the first season for me. First of all, I had to sit out half the year because I wasn't eligible, and then jumping in, and there's a lot of concepts that was brand new for me. First of all, glass out, like it wasn't really a concept that we worked with a lot. We tape to tape passes and move the puck that way, and also the box, yeah, the box outs and the way you're playing with the stick on puck and everything else. That was like really new to me. So there was quite a bit of change of mindset. So I started out as kind of like a two-way defenseman. I ended up as a defensive defenseman. So it really turned me around. A little bit bigger guy that can skate and clean in front of a net. And for me to earn ice time, that was the way for me to earn some more ice time. We had some pretty good players. I mean, the rover we had, it was tough for me to compete with Brett Hedican. So it was tough for me to compete with him of getting the PP time and everything else. So in order to find time for me to play was to play a defensive style.
My understanding is you finish up at St. Cloud, you go back home to Sweden, you play uh, pro or semi-pro for a couple of years, and then you come back to finish your degree. We touched on you're a graduate assistant, but then you go to the University of Wisconsin Stout. I understand that was also a new program at the time, Division three. But what I'm interested in is you did your would have been your master's in leadership and management. And listen, everybody listening to this has a bookshelf like I do with leadership books and books on coaching, etc. What did you learn in that program that maybe has stuck with you, or at least maybe set the table for what would eventually become your career?
A lot of stuff. I mean, when you working on your master's degree, you do a lot of research, and I'm always been a curious guy. I ask a lot of questions, and the main difference I would say between bachelor's and master's, you do your own research. So everything that you bring up in the presentation, either verbally or writing it down and in different formats, you have to back everything up. That's just the academic world. So in order to back everything up, you have to go and read a lot of books. So there's a lot of things that really dawned on me and cured my really, as you say, my really piqued my curiosity in the sense of how to work in a group. The group, we're all love the statistic analytics, the details of everything else. You're also working in a group of human beings that
Totally.
high performance, and very successful such. How do you communicate? How do you bring everyone on the same page and everything else? And in the business world is very similar in a sense, except that they're not in the newspaper or in media all the time and have to um, say you go to 9 to 5 work. Always you have to back everything up that you're doing and saying, except that you have your boss. Versus we see here pretty easily. We played against Ilves here in Sold Out Arena. You find out pretty quickly if you're doing pretty well
Yeah,
or
no
not doing
kidding.
so well. So those are fun things to work with in a sense of working together, and leadership is something that really piqued my interest, not just the details of tactics and everything else.
So at what stage in this journey do you wake up and say, you know what? I think I want to keep doing this coaching thing for as long as I can.
I've never planned to being a coach. That's the funny
No.
thing. No, never. That wasn't even on the map when I started. But it was like a new world opened up to me. I thought it was going to be really tough to retire. Back then, it was in Europe especially, you didn't really make any money playing hockey. So for me, I still have some school to take care of and move on to bigger and better things, right? So when I get back and I started coaching, I saw these whole new aspects, and suddenly I started understanding what coaches for. Because as a player, you always think that the coaches, like, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know, they always you're always thinking about your own thing, your own bubble and everything else. And suddenly this new world opened up of oh boy, like, there are more than just one player that really matters in order to be successful together. So it was pretty unique. But even when I started taking my degrees, I was still not planning on becoming a coach. It was just one thing led to another, and some new stuff presented itself when it comes to junior hockey, and suddenly I'm with the national team. So I've been taking a little different route than most coaches have been taking, because
Yeah.
I like to take on challenge. I like do not new things. I'm not just doing things like what everyone else is doing. I'm actually challenging not only myself, but yeah, my view of leadership, of taking on different challenges. So that's kind of the path I've been taking, and not necessarily just coaching hockey, but for 5 years I was in Utah, for example, where my wife is from, where I met her. And I
Yeah.
started this youth hockey organization from scratch, where we started with one team and 25 kids. We ended up, when I left 5 years later, I believe it was over 200 kids and five full-time
Wow.
coaches. So, and doing that journey somehow really was fun. I wrote the curriculum. I helped out with budgets. I did all this stuff, educating the parents of these young players. So that was a fun thing. And at the same time, I was involved with the national team. So I got everything from beginner skaters to working with the best in the world in the Olympics and everything else. And it was a perfect world for me, because I'm interested in people and human beings, and being part of group of peoples and everything else. So there was an interesting thing of that. Now we're talking about probably 15 plus years ago, and two of those players from that program in Utah are actually playing for me right now here in Tappara in Finland.
Come on. Really?
Yes, yes. So
Holy cow. Talking about coming full circle. Well, no, the thing that stood out to me is my understanding is that when you went to Tappara, that you were the first non-Finnish coach to coach in the Liga. And when I look back at your background, so much of it is contrarian. I mean, you kind of seem to zig when others would zag. And I just kept coming back to the fact that your early years as a coach, I mean, you go to the old America West Hockey League in Great Falls, you spend a year in Spokane, you just touched on Utah. How much of that willingness to maybe be different, stand out, try different things was rooted in coming up in an environment where I'm assuming pretty much everything you did, you would have been the first, or you would have been, coming at it from a different angle.
yeah, there's nothing different with me playing college hockey. Like I like
Yeah.
challenging. I like to, whatever you said, zag not zig. Like it's um, I'm the first non-Finnish head coach in 16 years in Liga.
Wow.
And when they presented this whole idea of how they wanted to change, very successful organization. You can see how many championships they have. There was really interested in number one, breaking the mold of not hiring a Finnish coach. They were willing to take the chance on that, and me to take a chance on taking on a double champions. 2 years in a row they won before I took over, and also European champ. There was a, like, they were a little bit of the hinge, and I was a little bit of hinge in the sense of doing something different. And I think it was a pretty good marriage. Obviously, we had a tremendous season last year, and this year we're going towards the playoffs. Not right now. So to answer your question, I always thought of the challenge more than this is the career path I want to take. I want to take on the challenge, and when everyone says that this is the way you have to do it in order to have a career in hockey and coaching hockey, I took it more like, okay, this is what I wanted to do because the challenge is there. So
Yeah.
this is nothing different. That's one the big reasons I came over to North America, and that's the big reason I'm here right now.
Well, I'm so curious about your 2 seasons in Tappara. So we had an opportunity a couple years ago. We sponsor the IIHF's coaching symposium that takes place during the World Championship. So we came over to Tappara, spent about a week there, and it's funny. My little guy's got a jersey with that logo on it, and it's the best. But my takeaway when I was in Tappara, after about 24 hours, I'm like, we think we love hockey in North America. We don't love it nearly as much as they love it in Tappara. Like it literally, legitimately felt like you were in the center of the hockey universe. You could, the passion part of me was palatable. And of course, it's not just your team there's two teams in Tappara, and there's a massive rivalry. And I bring this up because if I'm in your shoes, I know when you went to Zurich, the team was, maybe a little bit lower down in the standings. You played a role in kind of reestablishing them. They get the new rink, etc. But as you said, when you went to Tappara, the team was coming off a championship. They'd won the Champions League, and you're in an environment where I'm sure if things go right, it's awesome. There's, you're probably the toast of the town. The flip side of that, I'm sure, is if things don't go well, and all of a sudden this Swedish coach shows up and doesn't lead us to the promised land. There's got to be an immense amount of pressure. Just as you navigated that decision, how did you maybe take a glass half full view on the opportunity versus, hey, this could be a glass half empty if things don't go well?
100%. I mean, again, if you're looking at the career I had, I'm not going to the easy jobs or the easy tasks or, same thing when I was a national team head coach and everyone's going, okay, well, how can this guy coach the national team? He never coached an SHL in Sweden. So how can he take over the national team? So no matter what challenge you take on, there's always going to be people that don't believe in what you're doing, but that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. For me, I'm just trying to be part of this. And what piqued my interest with Tappara was that the success they have had. I want to learn from them. I turned it around and said, okay, what makes them so successful? So for me, it was a great chance to learn from the organization what they're doing so well. And I learned quite a bit during these 2 seasons now here of how they work and how tremendously professional they are. And I agree with you, Aaron, that here in Tampere, it's unbelievable, the interest of hockey. And like you said, the 2 teams here in Ilves, they just won the regular season. We won the regular season last year. We have great rivalries between ourselves. We have the locker rooms right next to each other. We call ourselves brothers, really. And I mean, we can really compete on the ice, but we're also working together because we're partners in this new arena in Tampere here.
Yeah.
So, but the hockey interest in Finland and in Tampere especially is unbelievable. You can't go anywhere without someone's going to ask you questions about hockey. Or so I really compare this to Canada, really. And when it comes to the interest of hockey, smaller, obviously, nation than Canada is, but everyone loves hockey here. It is number 1 on the list. It's number 2, 3. You go down. It's so what a great environment to work in. You also go out and play other teams in different other cities, and you see the fans there. It's a great fan culture here as well. So, but again, the main thing here for me is yes, they were really top of Europe when I took over the team, but we and Tappara, the organization, the management, they want to make a change the way they were playing. They want to play a more of a attacking style, more aggressive style than they played in the past, which the Finnish league period, Liga here has been playing a very trap-oriented, control breakouts situations, and they wanted to change up that kind of mentality, and I think that was something that was a huge task for me to take on. But I told them I'll do it. I'll do it 100% out in what they want, which is more of a aggressive forecheck, aggressive defensive zone coverage, and quote unquote supposed to be faster hockey as well. So so that was step 1 in the first year, and this year we made the team younger. We want to have what they call here athletes, the guys that really can work. So we have, half the team are teams from Tampere, and our job for next year is just to make it even more than that. Wow. So which is an interest, and this is kind of year 2 in the whole process of what we're talking about, Tappara 2.0. That's what the management calls this. So we identify some plays for next year and everything else, and also for this year. We even used players from that's either a junior contract or a 2-way contract with the juniors and Liga team. We used 9 of those players during the year, which is almost unheard of as well. So there's a lot of things that I really believe in too, and I think the change that this organization wanted to do and hire me to do it, I'm buying in 100% in what I'm set out to do.
So I've got a bunch of questions, and maybe just starting with, so when you have your first training camp with Tappara, and you've been tasked with introducing a more attacking style, both it sounds like offensively and defensively. Do you recall what would have been maybe some of the tactical aspects of the game that you would have focused on early on to help influence that switch?
Well, even when I was in Sweden, the reason they brought me over or back from North America to the Swedish national team was to have a more of a North American brand to the hockey games. Obviously, you still want to keep the Swedish tradition here in Tappara, the Tappara traditions, in the
Yeah.
sense of the structure and everything else. And it would be asinine not to do that, in the sense what kind of success they've had. But they wanted to change it more of an aggressive one, talking about 1-2-2 or 2-1-2 forecheck when it comes to offensive and neutral zone forecheck. Also the transition game, moving the puck up a little bit quicker, not getting into so many controlled situations, more of an up and down style of hockey. And then that's something that did with the national team as well, and I think that's where we had quite a bit of success with as well. And so that was kind of laid out for me in the sense of following my duty of what the organization wants to do, because that's my job. I'm a coach. So but there was I shouldn't say resistance, but it was a little bit of confusion, because think about it. They win 2 years in a row, and then suddenly this, like you said, the new Swedish coach comes in, and he's changing quite a bit when it comes to the playbook. So we had a meeting. I think it was maybe a couple of preseasons game into it, and the older players coming in, and they sitting down with me and say, "Coach, we have no idea what we're doing out there. Like, we have no idea. You gotta help
No
us
way.
out here."
Yeah.
And that's one of the things you're talking about, leadership. For me to build up that kind of relationship for the players to actually go in and do that, which I take pride in, that they actually comes into my office and ask, we don't know what we're doing. Well, that's my
Yeah.
job to help you out. So, it's not you guys failing, it's me failing right now. But I also knew it was going to take some time for me to install this new playbook that we have, and it's quite a bit different too. So, but great meeting. He's chipping away at it, and obviously I think we broke some kind of record when it comes to points last year in the regular season, and obviously leading into the championship and the playoffs as well. So the guys really, if it's something I really bow and really admire is the players, how they took on it, and that's one of the reasons why
Yeah.
it's so successful here, is that they take on those tasks. Like, they don't want to go the easy way. They want to go a way that they think is right, and they go full out. It was a fun, interesting season for me last year, and it's been a very, very different year this year as well, with the changes we made. And again, I'm here to learn as well, and I'm a better coach now 2 years in here than I was before.
I'm fascinated when you talk about the scientific approach, and I don't think this is necessarily novel, um, because we see it, in the National Hockey League. Like, players are going out with monitors on now for practice, their heart rate. Teams don't practice as much anymore. But specifically the fact that you've tapped into your local university, and I say that because in almost every industry, organizations do that. They go find really smart people in their communities at their local schools, et cetera, and they try and learn and get an edge, et cetera. And for some reason, in I would say in pro sports, but particularly hockey, through my lens, anyways, is that we're very closed off. We just do things the way they've always been done. We certainly don't want to get opinions of non-hockey people on how we should, play or coach hockey. But can you maybe give some examples of some of the things that, through this collaboration with the university, that they've maybe introduced, or things that you've learned about that, you're likely going to take with you to, throughout your career?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, because I'm 30 years into coaching now. So you have your gut feeling. And what is your gut feeling? Well, your gut feeling is your experience, right? So you learn, you try
Yeah.
new things, you learn, you fail, you succeed, and all that stuff. Gut feeling. And now, when like you said, we monitoring everything. So the heart rate from players, we monitoring exactly the amount of meters they skate, intensity meters they skate, on and off ice. We measuring everything. So, when I walk in every week, I get an email with the numbers, exactly what I'm supposed to hit each practice. I'm talking about the amount of skating meters, the intensity meters, The content is up to me. But this is what you're supposed to hit every day.
Can I ask a question about that? So just so I'm clear, you're being told instead of them saying, "Hey, here's what you did," it's more, "Hey, here's what you need to get to, and you need to figure out the drills, how you design practice to get here, but we need the players to get to here because we think this is going to influence their performance in a game."
100%. So
Wow, that's cool.
and I get feedback every time, and it's interesting though. Just to get back to what I just said, this,
Yeah,
in Germany called the Fingerspitzengefühl, which means that your gut feeling, what does it tell you? Okay, what you learn as a coach is very close to what I would have done without the numbers. Not, but what I learned, I can push it a little bit more. Like, to be honest with you, because you're a little bit restrictive as a coach, but now we're pushing envelope a little bit more when it comes to meters, intensity meters, the time they're out there, again, we're measuring everything here. So it's been really good for me in the sense of learning a little bit how, physiologically what you can push to what limit. So for example, last week we had a really intense game against Ilves here, a derby. And usually when a derby is, you hitting the roof when it comes to the intensity of the players, the meters of skate, and everything else. And the day after, we're going all the way up to Ulonkarpet, which is the furthest away. It was the 6 hours on the bus up to northern Finland and play a game. And it's a vast difference when it comes to the intensity meters and everything else. Obviously, depending what opponents and all, and the
yeah,
style of hockey and everything else. And I think if you're looking at any professional level game, we have, I believe, more back-to-back games here than you have in NHL. We have 60 games in the regular season.
oh wow,
We have, I believe, it was 15 games now in Champions League. So now we're adding on, and then we're traveling, obviously all over Europe and doing those. But so it's a pretty hectic schedule. Obviously, we don't
yeah,
fly all over the place like they do in NHL, but we're traveling and we're playing a pretty hectic schedule. But we feel, and there was a lot of concerns last year. And we had those discussions last year. We had a little bit of slump. I think we lost 8 or 11 games in January, and should we peel back when it comes to training? But I decided that no, we keep going with it because I wanted to see how far we can push it. And that was obviously the right move at that point in time. And we haven't had these discussions this year too. Unfortunately, we have a limited roster because of injuries and sickness and stuff like that in the same time. But
yeah,
so you have to be smart and you need to follow. Obviously, be like any plans, you have to calibrate and everything else. But we've been very, very scientific, and for me, I like that because I'm coming from the academic world of measuring things. It kind of gives me my peace of mind in sense of how can we structure this up to become better. But again, these, the strength and conditioning and department of our organization, it's up to me and the coaches what content we have. So one day, say for example, okay, less skating meters. Now it's more of a intensity battle kind of practice. And then, next practice is going to be more skating meters, and then we're measuring up to the game intensity and everything else. So again, I'm learning every day, and it's been a tremendous journey for me to see what makes this organization so good.
oh, I bet. And just as you say that, I mean, there's two parts to that collaboration, right? Like it takes the right coach who has an open mind and who's willing to listen and maybe accept that some of the things that are it is some of their intuition maybe isn't always right, and that there might be a better way to do things. And I'm just like, gosh, I'm just imagining, that scene in like the movie Miracle where like Herb Brooks is, get him to skate lines, like. Just imagine if he had the players strapped up and could see what the recovery was like. Um,
And actually, I did those skatings, by the way, because I came to St. Cloud right after he was there. So
okay,
we had all
really?
the systems. So yeah, we did all those, turning lights off in the arena, and we're skating until someone throws up or whatever. But it's it obviously
Those are
it's something new.
character builders, right? That's character building.
Yeah, I mean, it was something new too. Like,
Yeah,
what Herb brought to the table was something new. He looked outside the box. He's not doing what everyone else is doing. Something new, and obviously when you're watching the movie, you get a little bit of a obviously it's a movie, but still the content was more or less, you can't do this. You cannot do this. And they said, yeah, I can. And then finally someone that believes in them, and they did it. They went all the way and did something that no one believed they can do. And so I believe in those stories. And it's kind of funny because I came to St. Cloud right after this. I had, one of the players on that team as an assistant coach, and so it's something that maybe formed me a little bit too, of not just doing what everyone else is doing.
Well, you know what? Listen, man, in the time that we've done this show, the one thing that stands out to me is that um, you need to be lucky to be a good coach. Like, there's so much in these stories when you trace back into a coach's early days where they get, they cross paths with somebody or they have these experiences that, maybe make them open to when, the people from the university come in there and, they say, hey, because of what I went through as a young player or coaches I had, I'm willing to listen here. And I think that that's so interesting to see how these things sort of come full circle. Ricard, you mentioned that Tappara is putting a focus on having more homegrown players, and I mean, you're aware of this in North America. Gosh, especially today. I mean, youth hockey is so fragmented, and it just seems like you look at these 14-year-old kids now, and it looks like they've been playing in the minors for 10 years because every year they're jumping to new programs. Whereas in Europe, Tappara would have a youth program and would be very much involved and have an interest in developing players that are eventually going to play for the professional team. What does that look like when a team says, "Hey, we want to have more homegrown players"? Is that as simple as saying, "Hey, we're going to go on elite prospects, identify these players in other leagues, and try and sign them when their contracts are up"? Or is it also a process of saying, "Hey, we're going to maybe change"? Maybe it's taking some of this knowledge we're learning, in this collaboration with the local university, and we're maybe going to look at how can we better develop young players so that eventually they can come and play for us on the big team.
Yeah, well, Tampere is not huge. It's a big city in Finland for sure.
But it's like 350,000, right? Like
Yeah,
it's and you get two pro teams.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
But that kind
Yeah.
of tells you the interest too. I think we're averaging about 8,500 in last year, which is most in
Wow.
Finland, and same with Ilves. So it's pretty interesting to see again the interest. But the way we identify the players is we kind of follow them. When we not only have Tappara guys, we have Ilves background guys too. And we identify players that we feel that these guys would fit in athletic wise, what we want to do and the change we want to do, character wise, because again, one of the reasons that Tappara has been so successful is because of the character of the organizations. They identify in these guys that really, steps up when you really have to. So character is a big thing, and obviously when you're a local player that getting some new experience for somewhere else, I think that's just a strength. So we're identifying players. It could be older players that have been playing in NHL or SHL or even in Switzerland that want to come back. Or it could be some guys in Liga that plays for other teams. Or it could also be players that are coming back from college, So it's uh, it's a wild variety. But the two are the most gifted offensive players we have on the team right now is a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old. Like they're top in our, yeah, exactly. We're bringing them up from our junior team and give them a chance, an opportunity to excel and play. And I think both these guys have a great opportunity to potentially play in the NHL, if they play the cards right here. But really gifted players that they get an opportunity to play and at an early age with our team as a junior player. One is the first year senior player. Another guy is a 19-year-old that established himself in Liga this year. So those are a mix of players that have been somewhere else and coming back. There have been players that have been with the organization the whole time. Our team captain, for
Yeah.
example, has been here since he was a youth player, and only play for Tappara. When it comes to organization, have been part of Tappara. To with these young guys now moving up in organization, they're probably going to take off and play somewhere else in the big leagues. So it's a wild variety of different personalities, and it's also good to have a little bit of the age difference too. I think that's only healthy as well.
I'd be curious just culturally. So I think that, for us on the outside, we identify Finnish hockey as being very selfless, incredibly hardworking. There appears to be like the details away from the puck seem to be ingrained in the DNA of Finnish players, but perhaps at least historically, not as much emphasis on individual skills, or maybe players don't necessarily play with that freedom to go out and make plays and try things and risk making mistakes. And I sense that that's changing a little bit. But I'm curious, when a coach like yourself comes in and says, "Hey, actually, we're gonna play on our toes a little bit more." What's involved in maybe you know a, just putting players in a mindset where they're comfortable, that they can go out and try things that, as we know in our game, it doesn't always work out. And you're going to make mistakes if you're going to make big plays. But how do you sort of set players up to maybe go out and play outside their comfort zone a little bit?
That's an excellent question, Aaron, and that's one of the main reasons they want to make this change. And
Yeah.
if you look at what we did with the national team in Sweden, or national program, I should say, in Sweden, was, look at our defensemen, the amount of defensemen that we have developed in the Swedish hockey. It's bar none, one of the top in the world, like, to be honest. And so, and how many Finnish defensemen do you have in the NHL right now? Yes, they have less players, but not very many. Not very
Yeah.
many. Heiskanen is a top player for sure. You have some very competent defensemen, but if you look at the amount of players that Sweden have developed, and I think it's a little bit of what you said is the freedom, especially at the younger age. I think obviously professional level is professional level, but at a younger age, then you're letting the players play and solve situations, instead of always being told what to do, to go out and solve those situations, and you help them out as a coach and as a mentor. So that's been a really big thing in Sweden, to refer back to that. They even had some organizations and club teams in Sweden that don't allow the players under U15 or U16 to even shoot an icing or shoot a glass out. It needs to be tape to tape.
No way. That's so great though.
Yes, because it's developmental hockey, right? So,
Yeah.
so and I think here in Finland, what I really noticed is that, like, everything that you said is true. They're hardworking. They love the sport of hockey. Very well educated coaches. Very well
Yeah.
educated coaches, and the tactics are really, like, they're heavy on tactics and everything else. But I think, unfortunately, it's been really going down in lower levels as well. So now you have those 15-year-olds and teach them how to play the trap. And I think, I think they want to get away from that a little bit. At least Tappara organization want to get away from that, because they feel like if we can develop more players, if you let the players make decisions on the ice and learn from those, decisions. And sometimes they're going to fail, absolutely, but you learn more from failing, like, at the end of the day, because you keep pushing the boundaries. You are bound to get better, right? Instead of just being inside the box of doing the same thing. And I'm encouraged that as well as here, of not telling the players all the time exactly what to do, because they are going to solve the situations differently. And what I mean with that is, like, if you're putting one player with different skill sets, I always bring up this Eric Carlson, Victor Hedman one. I don't know why, but they're so different, but they're such a good players, right? Both of them are excellent
Yeah.
defense.
It's a great example. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, you have a one-on-one situation with Eric. Well, how is he going to solve that versus Victor? They're going to solve it differently, right? Because of their skill set. And you need to, as a coach, allow them to solve them differently. My job as a coach is to put them in those situations consistently, help them out to become better in teaching those situations. So, and a little bit here as well, we play a lot of scrimmage in our practice, and they do it at a younger level too. Everything from small area scrimmage to pure 5-on-5 with some kind of a start, some kind of a theme. So it's a forechecking theme or defensive zone coverage theme, or whatever it is, based on what we need to work on that day. But I believe in, okay, we went through this forechecking situation, but what happens after that, right? Not everything's going to be exactly the same way, right? Because it's a free flowing game. It's not baseball, it's not football with set
Yeah.
plays. It's a free flowing game. but you see consistency of things that keeps happening, right? So I'm kind of, like I said, I believe in this, scrimmage part of practice that leads into game situations. And like you said, we have a really hectic schedule here, so we get really careful how we're using our ice time and everything else. But again, to play small area games and 5-on-5 situations is bar none the best way of teaching, teaching the game.
So you have this great quote, and I don't know if this is a framework that you came up with, or if this came from the Swedish Federation. But it's that you guys shifted from allowing players to make mistakes to shifting to allowing players to make decisions, and they're kind of the same thing, but I can also see from a player's perspective, it's different, and it maybe empowers the player a bit more when you're telling them, hey, you can make decisions, solve problems. And you did a presentation for the NHLCA. Uh, Gosh, this is going back 5 or 6 years, I believe. And there's this great series of clips that you show, and you show. I believe it was you called it the Raisin Bread Camp. Does that ring a bell? Where you take like the top, I think U17 players in Sweden, and you're showing these clips of drills with defensemen, and they're so simple, they're so basic. But it seems that there's a real emphasis on the details. But then you show the game clips. And so you showed some players going back, or defensemen going back, retrieving pucks, shaking off the forechecker, protecting the puck, and making an outlet pass. And then you show the same thing happening in games. But then you showed a clip, and I can't recall the defenseman. He goes back, and instead of protecting the puck, he exposes the puck to the forechecker, but he beats him and he makes the outlet pass. And in my mind, I see that and I'm like, gosh, I mean, certainly in North America, it would have been like, hey, you come over here and sit in the middle of the bench and watch for a little bit. But when you showed the clip, you sort of explained it of saying, hey, like, it's okay. Like, he solved the problem. Like, he made the pass, he solved it. And that was okay. And that stood out to me as such a different mindset as a coach, that, hey, did the player make the play? And did he execute it? And how they do it is, if they can solve it and they can figure it out, that's, get comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I mean, look at the NHL right now. Look at McCarr. Look at Hudson. Look at those guys. What are they doing?
Yeah, totally.
So it's. I think it's a little bit of a coaching defect or whatever, because we're all serious about it. We're all very, very,
No question.
very, very knowledgeable in what we're doing. Unfortunately, sometimes we suffocate in the players in order. We constantly got to give them the truth. So, and when I started out as a coach, as a head coach, I'm Montana, I knew everything. Just come and ask me. If a player came up and asked me questions, I go, okay, I'll tell you. And the older I get, like I'm kind of curious and hear from the players, like, how do you just see that situation? So say on the bench right now, if I say something on the bench, I always take a note in my notepad that I have on the bench, and after the game, or even sometimes during the game, obviously between periods, if it's something really important at a point in time, I sit down with a video with that situation and we talk through it. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be right. It's just that we're on the same page. So,
Sure. Yeah.
so that's really important to me, that we talk through it, and after that we shake hands and we go, okay, move on. Let's do this better, or sometimes it's something good too. Like, it's not just the negative part. I think it's reinforcing the good habits as well. So based on that, I think you're 100% right. I think sometimes us coaches, that we suffocating the players a little bit. Like, there's always a structure needs to be there, always the tactics that have to be there, absolutely, in order for those 5 players on the ice, 6 players with the goaltender. Don't forget the goaltenders.
Yeah.
They need to be synchronized, and obviously the players that they're all dressing in the same colors, they need to be synchronized in what they're doing and be on the same page, because it's a team sport. But you also got to understand that the players need to make decisions, and quick decisions. I mean, it goes so quick and fast nowadays. And the more they can make decisions quickly, and instead of thinking about, okay, what does coach want me to do here? I think you're going to have a very successful player, and hence a very good, successful team.
Well, and I heard you say too that there was, and maybe this was an evolution in you as a coach, that it was getting comfortable with allowing players to make decisions on instinct versus what was drawn up with the X's and O's on the board, and just trusting them to play on their instincts, and that perhaps that those instincts can be, that a coach can enhance those instincts, without saying, hey, like, you always have to make this play, and trying to, as if you're playing, a video game with the players, that you got to trust them, just empowering them to make plays in the moment.
Scary, huh?
Yeah,
But
it is, right?
but,
It's
but
plus God forbid, it might prove that we're not the smartest people in the room, right?
no, not necessarily. I think everything is good intentions. I don't think any
Yeah.
coach is going out to try to screw anyone up. I just think that the big thing, and you say instincts. What are those instincts? It's something they've done in the past and been successful at doing. You know what I'm saying? So it's not just, okay, we're just going out and play free for all here. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the instincts of solving that problem, the problem solving, uh, and by doing that, you're getting good habits and instincts, based on your skill set, and that's what I see. And also, I think when I'm looking at hockey, when I really get in into it, it's like when you see this fast paced, fast skating, moving, but quick decisions, challenging each other, one on ones, defensively, offensively, those type of situations. Not necessarily see that we have a control breakout and everyone is synced here, or so. Because I've loved the idea of hockey being one of the fastest sports in the world, and physical sport. I love the physicality of hockey as well. But I firmly believe we get a very entertaining hockey by having Makars and Hudsons and Eric Carlsons out on the ice. Since we talked about defensemen, or McDavid, or McKinnon's, Nylanders. We always gonna have a Swede there, but those type of players, that makes it special. Those guys are superstars, and there's a reason they're superstars, because their instincts and what they're doing and their habits and everything else. Somewhere along the line, they figure things out. And of course, it comes with a lot of practice, but it also comes with a lot of allowance for them to fail and make mistakes and everything else, in order for them to be as good as they are right now. And if they continues to thinking about, oh, I'm gonna, I can't fail here, I can't make a mistake here, I don't think it's a good environment for those guys to excel at, especially younger years.
No, 100%. I think, you know what, just recently we saw a great example of that, in the final game of the Four Nations face-off, where Connor McDavid probably doesn't have his best game. He missed the net a ton. There was turned the puck over a bunch, but of course, I'm assuming because he was, the other coaches showed confidence. Eventually, he gets out there in overtime and he buries one. And oftentimes in our game, it's kind of like baseball, right? Like, you can get to the Hall of Fame if you're good 30% of the time. And I think hockey's very similar in that respect. We obviously talked a lot about defensemen. I think that's so interesting, because I think outside of, goaltending from, say, the late 80s to the early 2000s just looks dramatically different. I think we're seeing something right now with defensemen where, if you watch the game in the early 2000s to today, there's so many plays that get made that, players probably would have been told, you never do that. You never pass the puck in front of your net. You don't jump up in the play. When you look back at your own coaching journey, at what point can you pinpoint maybe where that became acceptable for defensemen to freewheel a little bit?
Oh boy, yeah, I don't really think it that way. For me, it's kind of just a journey of um, my own journey, somehow, of more feel more secure in what I'm doing and myself, and again, I think it's coming a little bit from my background of reading a lot. I read a lot and I ask a lot of questions. I have a lot of curiosity, and I think I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. I want to do something a little bit differently. If I believe in something is better, and I'm not always 100% right. No one is, right. So, but if you're just, I heard some quote here the other day of, I'd rather be a failure than a coward. And somewhere along the line, that's kind of me in a nutshell. Sometimes, yeah, I you don't win all the time. It's impossible. But somewhere along the line, I think I'm learning from those quote unquote failures. But at least when everything is said and done here in a few years, when I'm done coaching, at least I can't say I was a coward. At least I've been trying stuff. I'm trying to push envelopes. I'm trying to push the truth and question the truth sometimes. And some people maybe think it's uncomfortable. I think it's just a part of evolution of trying to, for me to try to get better myself, and also for,
Yeah.
because I love the sport of hockey. I love the leadership part of it. I don't take it lightly. I take it very seriously of leading these young men in doing something great together. And that's no better feeling, because after you win something, you sit in the locker room. I'm not that, I can't sit and enjoy those moments. I'm more like, okay, what do we do next year? Or how do we plan the
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
thing? Like, and then maybe that's one of my downfall as a person. But somewhere along the line, when I'm in the sitting there and thinking back, I think at least I'm trying stuff. I'm not just doing what everyone else is doing. I'm not a coward. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you can call I failed some situation. Absolutely, I think no one's winning everything, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm also willing to take on that challenge and look at things differently.
So, if we use the example of, you guys are bringing in the sports science people, and they're demonstrating through data that there's room to push these players and maybe do more. When you look at the game, just in terms of how it's played, where do you think there's room to um, maybe to evolve, I guess is the right word. What do you think there's room for our game to evolve, be that tactically or in terms of maybe how we empower different players to make plays?
Well, I know you guys been talking earlier about positional less
Yeah.
plays of being on, like defensemen can play forward and all that stuff, and it's already happened. Like, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
it's already there in a sense of, yeah, you have different assignments and everything else, but I think uh, I think it's just going to be more of that. I think in a sense of back in my days, you had something called the rover, like Paul
Yeah.
Coffey, so whatever when it comes to defensemen, and we have that here now too. We have some two-way forwards that play very sound defensively. You can trust in any situations and stuff like that. And I think the creativity when it comes to playing offensive zone, because it's in hockey, even though the scoring has gone up in NHL, I think in other leagues it's actually gone down. And I think it's a little bit of creativity when it comes to allowing the players to be more creative and give them tools to be creative in offensive zone and with the puck. I think that's the next step in the sense of educating the players to be more solving situations creatively, because us as coaches right now, away from the puck, we're very, very strategic, and we have everyone has
Sure.
the forecheck, the back check, defensive zone coverage. Everything is very, very planned based on that the other team is playing exactly the way that you're playing, or similar ways of playing. So, and that's, I think, one of the reasons we're successful last year, because we played way different than most teams did here. So they couldn't really solve based on their tactics and their strategy they've been using previously. They couldn't really, stop us, because we're playing it so much differently than they did. So, and this year it's already, some other teams are playing very similar now. It's more open. It's more, I would say, more entertaining, because there's a lot of stuff happens and not the same thing all over again. But there's a lot of skating, a lot of intensity in the games, a lot of emotions out there. The way that I think most people would like to have hockey.
Well, I'll tell you what. So you mentioned you're a reader. I'm partway through this right now, but I think you'll find it interesting. The book is called "The Why Is Everything." It's written by Michael Silver, who's an author for The Athletic. But it traces back Mike Shanahan, NFL football coach, back-to-back Super Bowls with the Denver Broncos, to his son Kyle becoming an offensive coordinator, to mentoring Sean McVay, wins a Super Bowl in Los Angeles, to Matt LaFleur, Mike McDaniels. And it's this concept of how, they kind of had the courage. And it's great because it goes back to the exact moments, like, of when they came up with these different concepts. And it's very much rooted in, hey, like, if everybody's preparing to defend this way of playing football, why don't we play a totally different brand of football? And I think for all the coaches out there, I mean, I've certainly appreciated reading the book, because it's these moments where they're, it's the off season and they're drinking beer on their back porch, and somebody says, he has this eureka moment of like, hey, what if we did this? And then they get the whiteboard out and they figure it out, which I think is fascinating and so cool. Um, I want to go back to a moment in your career, Ricard, that really stands out to me, at least when I look at it on paper. So you mentioned you go back to Sweden, you get involved with the national team program. Very much I think different than what we have in North America, whereas the national team coach is just the national team coach. They're not being pulled from a club. But you start out as the head coach of the U18 team, you graduate to the U20 team, and then you become the head coach of the national team. But you don't just become the coach of the national team, you get thrown into the World Cup of Hockey in 2016. And as much as it would be really easy to say, well, I coached some of these players when they were on their way up. Again, at least through my lens, big difference of coaching a player that's, under 20 and thinks they're going to be a pro, to coaching that same person when they've got a multi-million dollar contract and they know that they're one of the best players. And I would just imagine the dynamic of going from U20 to the senior team in the World Cup on that stage. That must have been, just such a unique experience that very few coaches would have had.
No question. And without a beard.
Without the beard, of course. Yeah.
No, but it was a little bit like you describe it, because a lot of these players, all of the players I've actually worked with previously, even the older players, like, so, it wasn't like something new that just happened to me, because I was assistant coach for the national team, but that was my first head coaching job, was the World Cup. And obviously a lot of people remembers that, because it was a little bit of like when you talk about, the Team North America and that tournament. And we had a little bit older team, and we going into that game. A lot of people remember that game between us and them, where we're on our heels for the first 10 minutes. We were not even in the game. We had to make some adjustments in our coaching and everything else, and then ended up pretty good for us, because we got that tie we wanted, and lost in overtime, but we got that point we needed in order to advance. But it was that was one of those moments too. I think what people remember, how it, the McDavids and McKinnons and all those on the same team, Matthews, and look at that roster now. Like, they're all stars. Like
it's unbelievable.
Yes. So and the way that they were playing, how entertaining wasn't that? So I think. Yes, to answer your question, but it felt pretty natural, because I worked with all those guys, even the older guys, so it wasn't like, oh, I'm over my head here. It was more like, okay, how do we do this together, in the sense of, we know that every game is going to be so tough, and so it felt pretty natural, to be honest with you. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to figure out this is bigger than it really is. But and again, doing the journey a little bit differently. Like I at that point in time, I haven't coached professional team previously. Think about that. So I've been coaching juniors and college. There was something new, and suddenly you have the best of the best in the world in the tournament, and I'm responsible for it. But what prepared me for it was that I had 2 Olympics behind me on different positions. I had several world championships. I've been coaching on the bench. I've been coaching a lot of the new guys, the younger guys, earlier age. So if it didn't feel like it was a huge step for me, it felt like it was a natural step, to be honest with you. Again, I enjoyed every moment of it. It was a pretty intense, 10 days, whatever we were together, but it was a learning lesson for me. And being a national team head coach, what's good with that, because you have some time to to come down from the high of coaching there, and reflect a little bit, and you put things down, and you're going back to it, and you can reflect, versus now, when coaching professionally, it's like every day is a new game or practice, and things are going. So the only time you reflect is a month or so in the summer, but then you have between the championships, between the Olympics and the World Championships and the World Cups, you have some downtime. You can go and reflect with people. You have some presentations, because that's a big part of being a national team head coach in Sweden, is you present your findings to the pro coaches all the way to youth coaches. And that's you learn from them as well. Again, I'm asking a lot of questions, and because I'm curious. So it was a great school for me to go through. I think I was with the national team for 13 years. So it was a long time for me to be part of that, and we had some unbelievable journey for me personally, but also for us with the federation. How we when we started out, we were kind of struggling at the world stage, to be honest with it, to being one of the premier teams in the world.
Well, so I want to go back. You mentioned that now you've got a notepad that you bring with you on the bench, and you take notes. And you just touched on it. The cadence of coaching the national team is different than coaching pro. I mean, coaching pro was recently on the show described as being in the washing machine. It's just like you're in the washing machine, you're in the dryer, and then you're back in the washing machine, and it's rinse and repeat. As you're going through this journey, 2 Olympic Games, the World Juniors, U18s, all this, is there any, when you reflect back, like if we went back in those notepads, is there maybe any notes where you're like, man, like seeing that or that experience or that note was really influential in how I do things today?
Yeah, of course you have that. You have eureka moments all the time, I think. And another thing that was really beneficial for me, my first 2, if not 3 years with the Federation or Association of Sweden, and what I did, I still lived in the U.S. and I flew into different world championships, and I was a scouting coach, as they call you. So I went to practices and watched all the other teams practicing and also scouting their games, and those findings I presented to obviously the coaches of our national team, but also those findings I presented for the whole coaching community of Sweden. So I learned tons from going to Latvian practice or Canadian practice or American practice and sitting taking notes, scribbling down different things, and so I learned tons of that. Kind of just being in the background, and I really enjoy it because I am a hockey nerd too, believe it or not, when it comes to tactics and strategy and finding new ways of being successful on the ice, not just the leadership part of it. So it's that was and at that point of time too, like. It wasn't really any pressure on me. Like I presented it, I did it, and obviously with my academic background, it's pretty easy for me to put a good presentation together and explain my findings because of my preparation for that. But I learned tons of that, and those notes, I still have those notes. Like my wife's,
Really?
yeah, my wife's trying to throw it out now because we've been moving quite a bit lately. So she's like,
Yeah, don't throw those out. Don't throw those out.
yeah. So you go back and you look at those, and there's some pretty interesting stuff on there. And back then too, when I started, was really interesting for me because I grew up in Sweden, where you had the Czechoslovakia back then, and Soviet Union, and how they were training and everything else. And now when I got back, now we have the Russian coaches, you have the Czech coaches, you have the Slovak coaches, we have coaches from all over, the Swiss coaches. So there is quite a bit of difference, when the way that we're, teaching on the ice and the way the coaching. To get involved in that was really, really fundamental for me, really, to take the next step, which was obviously being on the bench and coaching on the national teams as well.
I'm a hockey nerd too, and I got to ask you about one game that you coached in. 2014 Sochi gold medal game. Sweden goes up against Canada. And I'm not saying this because I'm Canadian. This is again just observational. That game that Canada played was as close to perfect as I think I've ever seen a team play. They just seemed so dialed, and it was almost just robotic shift after shift. I'd just be curious what did you guys see going into that game, and when you're going up against an opponent like that. Did you guys, how did you guys try and push back and maybe um, get an advantage?
Well, let me set up the stage for you here.
Okay.
So before what we had problems with was our center lineup, because before the tournament we lost Henrik Sedin. Daniel was
Okay.
still there, but obviously we lost Henrik Sedin. And then after game one in Sochi, we lost Zetterberg as well. So we were struggling on the center part of it, especially on the defensive side. So we were kind of running out of center. So the guy we had was Bäckström, right?
Got it.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so what happens right before the game? We were sitting there taking a pregame nap, and suddenly the team doctor comes in, and something is going on with Bäckström. And I was going, okay, what's going on here? So we're biking. We used bikes back then in the Olympic Village. So we're biking to the arena. And when you get down to the arena, there was two different pictures of it. The NHL guys were saying, "Hey, listen, this is a prescribed medication he got from the doctors, from team doctors, which we obviously put in the papers and everything else. So everything should be okay." Meanwhile, there were, what happened in Sochi too with all the doping and everything else. So it's kind of a little surreal. But so until game time, we didn't know if Niklas could play or not. We were waiting. And, one of the things I was responsible for was, coaching on the bench. So I'm trying to get the structure and on how am I going to coach this team now without these three really mammoth of centers for us.
No kidding. Yeah.
So it ended up with Niklas not being able to participate, which I think is an unbelievable wrongdoing for him, but for us as well as a team. Like, how do you go back and change that now? Like, you get a once in a lifetime chance of doing it, but stuff happens, and so you have to make the best of it as a coach. You have the team you have. So really, what I had to do was put in like Marcus Kruger as a offensive zone faceoff guy, so we can win the faceoff in offensive zone, and we had to make a lot of those type of decisions in order to be part of it. And unfortunately, they score 1-0. They can little bit play on that 1-0 and then 2-0 in the second period. So we could really penetrate their defense. And I agree with it, play very, very obviously tactically sound, but I still think that if we could have been a little bit more lucky and have a little bit different center lineup, I think we would have had a better chance in that game.
No kidding. Well, man, talk about revisionist history, man. Like, you forget about all these little details, and and obviously at that stage, man, one of those players being out has a massive influence. Having three of them out, and again, we probably don't. We forget those little aspects of the story, right? I can recall, this would have been in the early 2000s. I was in the agent business, and I went to go see a game. Detroit was playing in Calgary, and it was my first time seeing Nicklas Lidstrom live. And at that time in my life, that was the best hockey player I had ever seen in person. I just had, and it wasn't because nothing he did got on the highlight reel. But just watching him play in person, shift in, shift out, how efficient he was, to me at that time was remarkable. I'd never seen anybody play like that. And he probably had the puck on his stick more than anybody else on the ice. So I just became fascinated with Nick Lidstrom. And I came across this interview with him where somebody asked him about sort of, how he was taught to play. And his comment was, from a young age, I was taught to keep my toes up ice as much as possible. And I found that the more I keep my toes up ice, the easier the game gets and the more it slows down. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that always just stood out to me, the power of a coach, because if you can give players just like that simple little instruction, right? Like how much of a difference that can make. Just given your background in academia, what have you learned about language and how you communicate with players in terms of how to best communicate those little details that might make a really big difference?
Well, Nick's done that to me too, because I was fortunate enough to work with him in the World Cup. Like he was traveling with me, and we had him and Mats Sundin and Daniel Alfredsson was my advisors, which I gave them some job descriptions, what they were supposed to be responsible for during that tournament. So, and one of Nick's responsibilities was to travel with me and identify, especially defensemen, but also identify some players and obviously some ins with the NHL teams. But sitting up in the stands and listening to him, how advanced he was in his thinking. Like, we're watching, we're in Tampa, we're watching a game, and he was made one comment about one of the defensemen. I'm not going to say who, but how he should put the stick there and the skate there in order to get this done. And I was like, I never thought about that, but that makes total sense to me. Like, so it was so fun for me to kind of pick his brain when we're sitting and watching those games, and we're traveling to every NHL arena in North America. So we had some time to spend with each other, and also with Mats and Daniel as well. Their brains were very advanced, and I learned tons from them. But I agree with you. I think when you're talking to players, I think you need to simplify things. You don't need to make it more complicated. It really is. And simplifying is again, you need to look at when you get them at an older age. Like again, I was fortunate enough to coach beginner skaters all the way up to where I'm at right now, and some of the best in the world. And you're talking to even the best in the world, they need some help with some things. And a lot of times in that situation, it's more of a communication. You're talking to them, they're you seen that situation, and you sit down and watching the video, whatever, and then you try to simplify it for them. It's not a lot of times. It's us coaches, we're really responsible for making it really complicated sometimes, and versus simplifying it. It's a huge thing for me, and also when you get into some of the best in the world, you need to, how is this going to benefit them and the careers of making say a change or different role or something like that. That's a conversation sometimes you have to have as well, and you need to simplify it there as well. So, but again, I think what you described right now, those little things, especially early in the career for these players, those little things that you can help them out with, and again, it comes with experience and everything else, and listen to other people and being willing to listen to other people and learn. And I think me as a coach can be willing to learn, I think the players see that too and willing to learn too. And it's not about prestige and like that.
Yeah, I'm so glad. That great point. So well said. Um, you just mentioned something, Ricard, and made me think back. Like, how valuable in hindsight do you think it was that early on in your career? I mean, we talked about you going to Great Falls, but you spent, I believe it was 3 or 4 seasons in Utah, starting up a youth hockey club. But just the opportunity to work in probably relative obscurity. There probably wasn't a whole bunch of pressure on you, but you got to work with kids. And I'm sure a lot of that work was on the fundamental, like those building blocks. And just as a coach, getting a chance to, get your reps in, so to speak, on those fundamentals. And part of it's just like, again, we hear stories here where, some of the best coaches in the world talk about the value of working at a hockey school when they were really young, and just learning how to teach, learning how to communicate, and how valuable that is.
No, I think those are good. It's a good question in the sense of I think just for me to start that program was for me to learn really why I fell in love with hockey too. To be honest with you, like you work with young kids and they're struggling to get on the ice, and you teach them the edge work and skating, stick handling and everything else, and so number one, I really kind of fell in love with hockey even more when I was working with those younger players and kids. And for me to go back and write the curriculum all the way from beginner skaters up to U18, also kind of for me to revisit a lot of the things that I've learned. I poured out a lot out of myself in that curriculum, and helping out those coaches, educating coaches, which was biggest part of my job the last 2 years, especially of getting the right coaches, get young coaches into the program,
Yeah.
help them out with tools, watch their practice, give feedback to them. And by doing that, and also listening to them, asking questions, because most of the guys were from very different backgrounds. Some Canadians, some Americans from
Yeah.
Midwest or whatever. So, and some local Utah kids. So by doing that, I think I had some time to reflect too. And at the same time, I was fortunate enough to go to those world championships and be in the background, being the guy going and watch
Yeah.
practices, get some new ideas for my curriculum, or new ideas for how to educate different players and everything else. So, and I'm a big believer in skating and do a lot of skating in practice, especially early age, but edge work. And we're still doing it with our pro teams. We're still doing edge work and everything else, because I think that if you can skate and do that, I think you can get away with a lot of stuff. But so to answer your question, yeah, I think it's always good to go back to your roots, and roots is like how really how pure it is when you see. And I have a 6-year-old right now that playing for U7s here. I got 2 daughters here, and they're both playing hockey. So to see them excel and see them play, and it's very very rewarding for me to watch the next generation coming up, and also now I can be just a parent. This is the first time for me to be a parent. It's a privilege for sure.
That's awesome. Just as we close here, Rikard, what captures your curiosity today?
Oh boy. I think I'm just curious as a person, period. Every time I'm walking in, the funny thing, the people I'm working with, is pretty unique bunch of people. First of all, it's a language I don't understand. So everyone speaks a language I don't understand here in Finnish. But I'm learning from the people around myself all the time. Like not just in hockey, but when I go to my daughter's school or my wife meets some people and we're talking to them. And I ask a lot of questions, and I've been fortunate enough to live in Switzerland and Sweden and Finland and North America, US. And, so I met a lot of different people. I've been fortunate enough to travel up because of, thanks to my job, I should say. So I ask a lot of questions and learn from people. And then I think, we say what piques my curiosity right now is like anything. I walking in and I see something. I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. That's interesting. Or everything from some new bakery or they're doing something different there so being in this profession, you're fortunate to it's a pain in the butt sometimes to move, but you see different cultures, you see different people, and I think in someone's life to be well-rounded and understand people with different backgrounds, understand where they're coming from. I think you avoid a lot of conflicts, and ask a lot of questions, and I think that's should be more of that in the world of today of understanding each other and be more curious what other people think and everything else.
Amen. That's terrific. Last one, Rikard, you mentioned you're a big reader, and any books or perhaps other resources that you would recommend to coaches out there that have been helpful for you?
The one top of my head right now is the Culture Code, Daniel Coyle. Excellent book. It's not. It has a little bit of sports in it, but what is a culture? That's a big thing, and I think in that book you learn that culture is a Latin word that means care. That you care about people. You care about people around yourself, and by showing care, you get tenfold back. But it's a very interesting of functioning and non-functioning organizations in the world. What's the difference? And I think that first sentence I just said is a huge point of it. Like, and in information flow and creativity and everything else. What peaks that? I love to give people in my organization, my staff, responsibility. That's the biggest thing I think people can excel with, and nothing different with players. I put a lot of pressure on the players that they need to be part of taking decisions, making decisions too. Like give them responsibilities, because that's what drives people. You wake up in the morning and the reason you put in, you go even though it's 10 below outside, you go to work because you have responsibility. If you don't open that door, the shop doesn't open. So
yeah, totally.
But that's a great book. Like it's a little bit of one of the books I probably read 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny. I just heard on that note, it was an interview with the founder of Shake Shack fast food restaurant here in the States. And he made this comment that delegating or giving people responsibility as a leader, it's a gift. And that's how it should be viewed, that you're giving people a gift that's going to help them get better and improve. It's just, and I just bring that up. It's really stuck with me. Rikard, this has been so fun to catch up. I believe it was 2019 when you came out to Toronto and spoke at our event. And, again, we were just sort of getting going now. And, but yeah, really appreciate your time then. Really appreciate your time now. And best of luck to you and Tappara as you guys look forward towards the playoffs.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you taking time. It's been fun.